So I'm going to talk about MIDI Polyphonic Expression, the profile for MIDI 2. I'm not going to talk a whole lot about MIDI 2, but I'm going to talk about MPE in general. So some housekeeping. This presentation can be found at moforte.com/news. And if you just go there, you'll see the presentation at the top. Okay, just a little bit about me. I've been in the Silicon Valley for 40 years, and I built my first polyphonic or monophonic sound-making synthesizer from a kit at Radio Shack in 1970. I used to gig with an ARP Avatar guitar synthesizer, and over here you can see these are some simulations of vibrating strings and membranes that I did back in 1982. And I was a researcher at Stanford at Karma, and I'm currently the CEO, CTO of MoForte, and the chairman of the MPE subcommittee in the MIDI Association. So MPE, I'm going to talk really briefly about it. It's a set of conventions. It's built on MIDI 1.0, and it enables independent expression for each note or row. It's already supported by over 250 hardware and software products, and it really has legs. It's taken off. One of the questions that I often get asked is, well, MIDI 2 has per note expression. Why would MPE even be brought over to MIDI 2? And the reason for that is there's so many products out there that already have MPE support, and the effort to get those products to migrate to MIDI 2 using MPE 1 is really incremental as opposed to starting from scratch. The spec for MPE was ratified in January of 2018, and a clarification revision was put out in April 2022. If you get my deck, you can take this link to go directly to the spec. And there's a MIDI 2 profile that's in the works, and it's expected to complete in 2023. Okay, MPE roots. So it's similar to how guitar controllers have been doing per string control for the past 35 years. And back in 1999, Lippold Haken did a controller. It's a very nice controller still that has X, Y, and Z expression. It's really a precursor for MPE. And Keith McMillan, who you can see over here with Roland Lamb and Roger Linn, did a thing in 2010 called the Cabo. And he independently came up with an idea for independent expression that he called AIM in 2014, roughly the same time that the MPE spec was coming together. The LinnStrument, you can see Roger Linn down here with Harriet Bevan. The LinnStrument is really the first instrument that realized MPE, and Roli also adopted MPE for the Seaboard in 2014. There's a picture of Roland Lamb with one of the original Seaboards. So MPE in a nutshell, there's not a whole lot to it. It's derivative of what's called MIDI Mode 3, MIDI Mode 4 in regular MIDI 1.0. And there's a special RPN 6, that's basically used to communicate how many channels and where a channel split might be in the MPE implementation. And then RPN 0 is used to set the pitch bend sensitivity, because MPE makes extensive use of very wide pitch bend ranges for pitch fluidity. So it can either be channel per note, so every note gets its own channel, so you're rotating through channels, or it can be channel per row or string, like on the LinnStrument or like on my product GeoShred, where every string is on its own channel. There's 3 special controllers that have been allocated for expression. There's one for X expression, which is almost always pitch bend. Roli calls this glide. There's key Y, which is CC74. It's used for sliding forward on a key. And there's key Z, or channel pressure, which is used for pressing into a key and generating expression. There's also a manager channel, typically channel 1 or 16, and that can be used to globally send expression messages to all of the voices that are currently playing on all channels. There is a low-high split. It's not used very often, and it's not clear if that mechanism is going to be retained in MIDI 2. Okay, the importance of pitch fluidity. So pitch fluidity is an expressive metaphor. It's used in musical performances around the world. It's really important in South Asian music, in Turkish music, in a lot of different musical traditions. And MPE directly addresses pitch fluidity by supporting per note multi-octave pitch bending. And so, for instance, we see with some of our customers who are in India, slides that go a whole octave as a part of the expression mechanism. Though it's not a part of MPE, pitch rounding is super essential to enabling performers to play in tune. If you didn't have pitch rounding, you could be sliding to a note and you could stop there and you might never ever get in tune. And further, you might not be in 12-tone equal temperament. You might be in, for example, 52 ET, which is used in Turkish music. And when you get to the note, it's not perfectly in tune in Western music. And so what pitch rounding does is when you get there, it brings the note perfectly in tune with the temperament that you're currently playing in. And that's super essential for performers to be able to play in tune. Okay, I'm going to talk a little bit about modeling synthesis and MPE. So there are sample-based synthesis techniques, but there are also model-based synthesis techniques. And what's great about models is that they're parameterized and can be musically expressive through the parameters. And until recently, the options for expressing musical parameters were limited. It was basically the mod wheel. If you had a PC-1600, you had some sliders and the pitch wheel, but there was not a lot of opportunity for expression. So what MPE did is it created a standard for individual expressive control for every note or for every row, if you have a row-based metaphor. So MPE plus modeling synthesis, this is a really big deal. And when we get to the video examples, I think you'll see the degree of expressivity that's possible. It makes a whole new generation of controllers possible, whatever the instrument creator wants to dream up. It also offers an expressive performance mechanism for parameterizing synthesis. So it could be physical modeling, which is something we do a lot of. It could be virtual analog, like what Herritt does over at Moog. It could be FM. Anything that has knobs that you can control, you can now bring that expression to be controlled at a per note basis. Together, MPE and model synthesizer, model synthesis is greater than the sum of the individual parts. So here's some MPE controllers. I just looked around what's available. There's a lot of MPE controllers now, and some of these are really fun to play. I just got one of these Osmos, which is this one right here. It's covered with LEDs, and you can program it to be almost anything that you want. Excuse me, that's the Airy Touch. The Osmos is the one on the bottom. That is also an amazing controller, and all of these controllers are really amazing controllers. Okay, here's some modeled synths. This is just a handful of the synths that are out there. If you get this deck, Roger Linn has a list of about 200 products, over which are half are synthesizers, and Roli has a list of products as well. Okay, demos. This is a reel of expressive performances that are being done using MPE. Most of these are videos that we had around, so they're mostly done with using GeoShred as an MPE controller, but they could have been performed on virtually any MPE controller. And let me go ahead and play this reel for you, and I'll give you an explanation as the reel plays.
This is Gerald Peter using a 3D Touch iPhone. He made a this is also a 3D Touch iPhone. It's a saxophone with overflow. This is Jordan Rudis and Mark Wood, a real violin versus a model violin. This guy Bernfield, he's doing kind of a fusion piece. He's using 3D Touch on his iPhone to do the pressure expression. This is Gerald Peter. He did sort of an orchestrated brass arrangement. This is a group in Italy using feedback guitar model. MPE to express it. And here's a cello. Again, using 3D touch. This is using MIDI mode 4. It's a multi-temporal example. Every row is a different synthesizer with its own expression. It's Mahesh Raghavan from India. He makes extensive use of this fluidity. Finally, this is Jordan Rudis. He's using a real piano with this, but he's got an expressive cello and an expressive oboe. Go back to the deck.
Okay, so MPE for MIDI 1.0. I'm just going to go over briefly what implementers have to think about. There's not a lot that they need to do. They need to decide if they're going to do channel per note or channel per row. There's a message that you have to send, RPN 6, which describes the number of channels that are being used. There's a pitch bend sensitivity that needs to be set. It's by default it's 48, but it allows the pitch fluidity that's found in MPE. The default MIDI mode for MPE receivers is channel per note. So developers might not need to do anything if they're doing channel per note. And then you just need to send your regular channel voice messages, note on, note off. And for expression, if you've built a controller that has 3 dimensions of expression, you send pitch wheel, you send channel pressure, and you send CC74. It's all standard MIDI 1. Okay, and now we'll finally talk about MIDI 2. Again, I'm not going to say a lot about MIDI 2, but MIDI 2 is a dialogue between senders and receivers. And one of the big challenges with the current MPE is there's frequently mismatches between the sender and the receiver. And part of that is because there isn't a dialogue that's going on. So the main thing that in MIDI 2 is added to MPE is that the MCM RPN 6 is replaced with profile details inquiry. And so the sender says, hey, these are the channels I want to use. The receiver says, I can use those channels, or I can't use those channels. Here are the channels I can use. And the sender says, okay, I can use those channels. So there's a dialogue that happens in MIDI 2. The rest of MPE is pretty much the same. If you are in what's called fallback mode in MIDI 2, then the messages that you'll be receiving are still 7-bit and 14-bit messages, even though they may originate from a MIDI 2 controller. But also you can use UMP, which is the new 32-bit message format. UMP messages can reach you as well. And if you can't process UMP, you can use translation to turn them into 7 and 14-bit messages. So the one addition that's been made to MPE for MIDI 2 is that there are 16 additional high-resolution controllers, because we know that XYZ are not enough. You may also want to say for this note, it's being played at a particular bow pressure. This note, it is being played at a particular bow position. There's probably any number of things that you might want to add expressively as controllers get more sophisticated and as synthesis methods get more sophisticated. And the last thing, the MIDI modes 3 and 4 just have different names in MPE for MIDI 2. They're now called polyphonic channel pressure response and monophonic channel pressure response. So MPE, it's pretty simple. We're hoping that lots of instrument creators are going to create all kinds of crazy new kinds of instruments. Maybe 5-10 years from now, we'll see a whole lot of instruments that we've never seen before. And questions?
I
I want to thank all the people who've been supporting us for the last 30 years. There's been a whole lot of people, some of them are in this room, have been supporting our efforts to bring physical modeling to the world.